I'll begin by asking you to affirm, as you appreciate you're about to be asked
Of course.
questions by Mr. Connell.
Yep.
But could I ask you to repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely and truly
I solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Now, as I've said, you're probably fairly familiar with our procedure.
Unfortunately, yes.
But can I remind you that if you want to take a break at any stage, please just give an indication and we can take a break.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Connell.
Good afternoon, Mr. McKechnie.
Afternoon.
I'm going to start with a question that you'll be expecting, which I ask all the witnesses, which is that you've given a witness statement to the inquiry. Are you content to adopt its content as part of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not going to go through your experience and so on because we've been there before in other sessions. But I do want to ask you about your involvement with the project that we're concerning here, which I'll just simply call the new hospital. Now you deal with that in your witness statement, and that gives rise to one or two additional points. Can we have the witness statement, please? It's in the bundle at page 35. So next page, please. So we're going to start. I'll use your witness statement as a guide through some of the issues we're going to discuss. In paragraph 7, you start to explain that TUV sued because names like so many other organizations have changed, were involved at various stages.
Yeah.
Now, what you then go on to say is that Wallace Whittle, which is where you were and where you were involved, is correct?
Yes. Yes.
In the early stages of the contract, were involved in the compilation of the employer's requirements.
That's correct. Yeah. A portion of the employer's requirements, the engineering portion.
Yeah. The M&E stuff.
Yes.
To be colloquial about it. Now, does that mean that you, and this is, if I say you, it may mean you personally or Wallace Whittle, it matters not, unless you tell me to the contrary, that you were responsible for the provision in the employer's requirements that all of the isolation rooms should be PPVL rooms designed under HBN supplement?
Absolutely not. No.
No?
No.
So who put that provision into the employer's requirement?
I couldn't honestly tell you. It would have been part of the, trying to get the right words here, the accommodation schedules. So the accommodation schedules would list the wards and the ancillary areas that they were looking for, and within that, I would have expected the isolation rooms would have been called out, but it's not an M&E type provision to give.
Well, is the design to be followed when constructing the isolation rooms an M&E provision?
The engineering element of it, but the excuse me, the main element of it, the actual room itself, the layout of the room, is certainly not an M&E provision.
No. Just wonder if perhaps you're at cross purposes here, Mr. Connell.
I asked the question a different way. In the employer's requirements, it essentially says isolation rooms to be designed under HBN for supplement 1,
Yeah.
SPN for supplement 1, which are, as we've been hearing, essentially PPVL rooms.
Yeah.
Where would that provision come from? And what's the provision saying isolation rooms to be designed under that guidance?
Again, that would have been part of the accommodation. That would have been the title of the isolation rooms.
So when you say that you were responsible for putting together the design guidance that was relevant to be inserted into the employer's requirements, not that bit of guidance.
Not the numerical number, nor the style of the isolation rooms.
Well, I didn't ask you about the numerical number. I'm just looking to see if we can find out where it came from, but you can't help us with that.
I'm sorry, no, I realise the question that you're driving at, which is that there was no other style of isolation rooms, but that wouldn't have been an engineering decision or a reflection on the brief.
Ms. McKechnie, just so that I understand the answer, you would expect the schedule of accommodation, which essentially describes the numbers of rooms involved in a particular department, you would expect the schedule of accommodation, first of all, to identify whether any rooms were isolation rooms.
Yes.
And you would also expect that isolation rooms would be described as positive pressure ventilation lobbies. It's just that, have I understood your evidence?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would that be something you would be asked to check in the course of preparation of the employer's requirements?
I really wouldn't have thought so, no.
Sure. Now, the other thing I need to ask you about is a sort of timing sequence question and what you did or didn't do. We know that Wallace Whittle was appointed as a sub-consultant to Curry and Brown for the initial stages of the work, i.e. when the employer's requirements were being prepared.
Yes.
Up to contract signature, essentially.
Up to December 2010.
2010, not 2009?
Oh, sorry, 9, yeah.
If I tell you the contract was signed on the 18th of December,
Yes, sorry,
2009.
yes, sorry, I get my numbers mixed up.
And the broad picture that we have, which is cropped up with other witnesses, is that at or around that point, December 2009, January 2010, the troop of sub-consultants who had been working to Curry and Brown were all stood down, architects, structural engineers, and Wallace Whittle.
Yes.
Now, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's why you say in paragraph 7, this appointment came to an end in December 2009, January 2010 at the conclusion of the tender exercise. Now, not covered in your witness statement, but we have been told over the last few days of evidence of later involvement during 2010, so not after change of name and ZBP go bust and all these other things, of Wallace Whittle in the ventilation of the new hospital.
Right. We were approached, if I remember this correctly, we were approached by the health board with the suggestion that we could be retained to give technical advice post the termination of the Curry and Brown contract.
Right.
The offer that was on the table was on a kind of time and line basis.
Yeah. So to be charged at a rate to be agreed for the time you spent doing the work.
Yes, but without an agreed final sum or whatever for it. And I've been thinking about this one. I believe that we attended an initial meeting early in 2010, but it wasn't a detailed presentation, and we weren't doing anything other than understanding what was potentially going to be involved.
Okay.
We didn't agree with them on it. We didn't agree a fee with it on it. So our technical involvement didn't go any further forward than what we're speaking about here.
Okay, let me see if I've got this answer correctly for his lordship. You were a sub-consultant, you were stood down. Suggestion was you could be retained on a time and line basis for something that might come up, details of which were not then known. You had an initial discussion. Did you then agree that was okay, or?
No, we didn't agree to it. We weren't. That it wasn't commercially attractive to us at the time what was getting put on the table. So our continued non-involvement continued right up until the later on in 2013.
And that was an approach directly from the health board as opposed to Curry and Brown.
My memory is it was from the health board as opposed to Curry and Brown, because Curry and Brown, again, obviously we were part of that party at the beginning, and then that got split, and Curry and Brown took on a different role within the contract.
Thank you.
So this idea of you being, let me call it almost on call, so somebody can ring you up and say, can you come and help us about X? It'll take you 3 hours, we'll pay you Y.
Yeah.
That wasn't an attractive proposition. So when you had a discussion in early 2010, you said no.
Yes.
Were you then subsequently asked to do more work in 2010 by the board?
Not on the ventilation. We may have done some work direct to them on the electrical works to do with the interconnection of the new proposals with the existing infrastructure on the site. My guys had quite a good understanding of what they had on site, and because of that, my memory says that we may have done some work for them there, but that was the only works we would have got involved in. Nothing to do with the vent or the heating or anything that mechanical.
A witness, Mr. Pike of Multiplex, thought that Wallace Whittle had been involved in M&E reviews in August 2010. Do you recollect anything about that?
I don't believe so, no. No. Bear in mind that our closing comments and all of this was that there was insufficient detail, in our opinion, from ZBP for us to comment on the mechanical proposals. And that didn't actually, I know from the information I have, that didn't actually go to the RDD process until 2012. So, I don't see the link to detailed proposal by ZBP in 2010.
Right. I think maybe I need to know about this final comment.
Yeah. I'm sorry these questions are slightly awkward in terms of the detail, Mr. McKechnie, because we're only trying to piece together material that we've only just got. In response to the suggestion that you were involved in an M&E review in August 2010, you say no, and you then refer back to a closing comment. First of all, when would that closing comment have been made? That
would have been it's actually in, excuse me a minute, right, what I'm referring to is...
I take it, my lord, there's no objection to the witness checking some reference here.
No, I have no objection to that. Well, perhaps identify the prominence of the in due course.
Bundle 43, volume 5.
Okay, let's go find it. Let's have bundle 43, volume 5. And where?
So I was trying to be helpful, but I haven't noted the page number. It should have been helpful.
I take it you're referring to a note you made yourself, having looked at the documents you were provided with.
We were charged to look at the proposals, the multiplex.
Sorry, can I take this a step at a time?
Sure.
You have in front of you what I take is your own note to yourself. Is that right?
But I've not got the page number on it. That's something I'm not that
fine.
clever.
Now, the second step may be to answer Mr. Connell's question.
Well, let's see if we can identify the document.
Yeah.
We had bundle 43, volume 5 up. It has an index. Can we just go to the index, please, just at the front? And it should, what am I looking for? If I'm looking for this document, is it an email or something?
No. It's a table of comments on multiplex's proposals.
All right. And do you know when it is in date terms?
No, sorry. I'll confirm it to you. Like again, I just scribbled down the bundle that it was in.
I mean, it might be easier for us to find it if we knew roughly when it was dated.
It's going to be 2010. I would suggest.
Might be my fault.
See, you had the M&E clarification log down.
Yeah. Well, that is a document we'll be looking at.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to, the M&E clarification log?
No.
Okay. So is it before you were stood down by Curry and Brown?
Yes. Basically, we looked at the proposals and the details that ZBP Multiplex had provided, and we commented on them several times that there was insufficient detail for us at that point in time to give a detailed commentary on them. The response, which is also on the table from Multiplex, states quite clearly that the detailed design will follow further down the life of the project. So the point we were making was that at the point in time where we were stood down, there was insufficient detail for us to give a detailed commentary on the ventilation proposals. And it was highlighted that and agreed, if you like, that was going to be provided during the detailed design stage. None of that's abnormal in my experience.
No view on whether it is or it isn't. I'm just trying to ascertain when you made this. So before you were stood down in around January 2010.
See if you go to item 111.
111.
Page 918.
Yeah, that's dated November 2010.
Yep. You see our comments on the left-hand side and the Brookfield response.
All right.
It's just exactly what I was saying.
Right. This is the document you were looking for, Mr.
Yeah, it's one of them. There's a number of them.
Okay. Well, let's try and help ourselves by getting to the bottom of this. This is a document which on its face is dated November 2010, so way into the design year, as it were, that followed the standing down of the technical team. And are you telling us that things that are described as Wallace-Whittle comments were actually made about a year earlier?
I think they were made earlier than that, and that document has been a rolling document saying what they were. what they were intending to do.
Right. So when you say you had a recollection that you told them that what you'd been shown didn't have enough information, that's the kind of thing that's said in box 1.
Yes.
Right. So if somebody suggested to you that you had been participating in November 2010 in commenting on Brookfield materials, you would say, no, we weren't.
I would, yes. I think what happens with these things is that once we've raised the comment, passed it to, as it would have been passed to Curry and Brown at the time, that's then collated into a master document, which has a life of its own afterwards.
Okay.
So would I be right in thinking that notwithstanding the 8th November 2010 date, these are comments that you would have provided during the competitive dialogue stage, or have I got that wrong?
No, these would have been comments just prior to Multiplex being awarded. So from the package of information that we had.
Right. So by that time, Multiplex would have been the preferred bidder.
I believe that would have been the timescale. Irrespective of that, and probably of more importance for the inquiry, is the fact that this is recording that at that earliest, that there was still a degree of design development to occur from the ZBP ventilation details. So as of, if we take it as of the revision A of that document, November 2010, there was still details to be, detailed design development, which would have been their ventilation drawings fully detailed up with the proposals.
Right. And just to state the obvious, this table is a means of Brookfield communicating to GGC and whoever GGC is being advised by at that stage.
Yes. So it's a running schedule of tasks, if you like, which have got to be completed.
So if I go back to my earlier question,
Yeah.
if there's a suggestion that you participated in some kind of review in August 2010 of ZBP ventilation design, what's your response to that?
I don't personally remember it, but I do know that there was some dialogue that took place, which was between the health board and themselves on the continuation. But the important factor from me is that that continuation did not happen.
Right. Well, let's make it simple. Did you participate after January 2010 in any discussions about the ventilation system at the new hospital?
Okay, the simple answer to that, because you've asked a simple question, is that no, we couldn't, because there was what we were recording was there was insufficient detail to have that type of detailed review.
We're just trying to work out if you were involved in or not.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. I don't personally recall anything. I know that my contract with Curry and Brown was terminated in and around the end of 2009 when Multiplex came on board. we may have attended a couple of meetings to try and sort out this, whether we were going to do more or whatever on it. I don't have any notes of any of that. I haven't seen anything on that. So just trying to be as open as I can with you, and what I can recollect and can't.
Okay. Well, there seems to be some residual confusion as to whether you and or Wallace and Whittle were involved or not. You think there may have been a couple of meetings, but that was just to see if you could help.
Yeah. But as I say, the important, and I know where you're going there, so I'm trying to help you, is that what we were recording, irrespective of whether we attended these meetings or not, was that the detailed design of the ventilation wasn't available for us or for anybody at that point in time.
Another of the suggestions that's been made is that what was being prepared was something called Appendix K, which was to be part of the full business case that went to the Scottish Government for approval, and that you signed off on that full business case in the autumn of 2010. Oh, sorry, on the Appendix K for the full business case in the autumn of 2010.
Sorry, I haven't seen anything that suggests that.
Well, if you could just try and tell me what you remember first, and if we can find anything that helps, we'll go and do that. The implication is that, say, in the autumn of 2010, you or Wallace Whittle were signing off on behalf of the board something that was going to the Scottish Government, this Appendix K. Do you remember anything about that?
I don't remember us signing off anything. I do, and it's part of the what we have here, which is that report, I'm assuming the Appendix K, which went to the government along with the business case, would have recorded our commentary that there was insufficient detail on the ventilation schemes for us to comment, and the same comment being made by Multiplex that information was to follow in due course.
Did you? Perhaps we did. Can we have Bundle 43, Volume 3, 1280, just in case it helps? Here we are. It's just the same.
It's the same document, yeah.
It's the same document found in a different place. What about Bundle 16, 1677? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I recognise this document, yep.
And that appears to be a Wallace Whittle document, or at least Wallace Whittle are noted at the foot.
It was, yes.
And on the face of it, it's dated November 2010.
I agree, Jen.
When was it prepared?
It was prepared in, it's on there on issue 1, 10, 11, 10, November 2010. So yes, that document we produced.
So at that point, you were doing some work?
We were, yes.
For the board?
Absolutely agree. Yep, that's where.
And what were you asked to do?
Well, ZBP had produced a document which was an environmental matrix, which was basically a schedule of a number of rooms, which had their engineering proposals detailed on it. And that document there was our commentary against their proposals. And I think when you go into it, we record that there was an amount of ventilation details which were missing, amongst other bits and pieces.
Okay, well, let's just.
So there's something askew here with the dates. That's what we need to check, to be frank.
Yeah. I certainly am not very secure in the dates at the moment, because I had understood, which is consistent with Curry and Brown having let go its sub-consultants, including Wallace Whittle, that Wallace Whittle's involvement on behalf of the board terminated at the end of 2009. But we have a document dated November 2010,
yes,
which you accept is a Wallace Whittle document, and presumably Wallace Whittle wouldn't have put that date on it without a reason.
No, it's definitely, it's a 2010 document.
Well, let's just scroll on a couple of pages to see if that assists us at all. Executive summary. So this is your comments on their matrix. Is that right?
Yeah, but you also say the introductions, which is confirming that we were asked to do it by Curry and Brown.
Right. And it says reasonable assessment of the requirements, various anomalies, and in paragraph 1 highlights areas that do not appear to be in compliance with the employer's requirements. So were you asked to go through everything and check whether they met the employer's requirements?
No, I think that this was a selection of rooms.
Right. Let's scroll on.
Right, so just that I'm following. The environmental matrix, as I understand it, is an Excel document which, if complete, would include every room in the hospital.
Yeah, but see, if you look at section 3, matrix parameters, the 720 rooms are a representative sample of the overall project. So this wasn't intended to be a complete review of the whole hospital.
Right.
I don't know offhand how many rooms it's got, but it's certainly got a lot more than 720.
In excess of 1,000, but I can't give you the figure.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Well, let's just see if we can sample what's on this document. If we scroll on to the next page, we see that various topics are discussed. Ventilation extract, ventilation supply, you say derived generally from FHTMO 301. Bedrooms are agreed at 40 litres a second. Well, we'll come to that. Say offices are 10 litres a second. They don't meet BCO level of 12. That's another piece of guidance for offices, presumably. Is that right?
Sorry, what clause are you at there?
4.5.
4.5. Sorry, 4.5.
And then 4.6.
Yeah, same.
So, what were you trying to do with this document?
What we were doing was trying to split down the comments on the various columns, if you like, that which were the proposals from ZBP, and highlight if there was any areas which were not in compliance or I had some query on them. And then you will see on this document that document was then passed to ZBP, and they appended their own handwritten notes on the
Okay, let's scroll on until we get some handwritten notes and move on a bit. Okay, so So this,
So
here we
see-
are. So
right.
we've got a page, sorry, we just saw a page there, page 11, where there's some comments on temperatures on the left-hand side, a comment on extract and supply ventilation rates, and then there's some ZBP comments on the right.
Yeah.
So can you remember whether Ward 4B or Ward 2A were reviewed here?
No, sorry, I don't. I can't recall the format of the content, if you like, of the ERs. I suspect that these were general rooms as opposed to specific wards.
So did this instruction from the board to do this task extend any further than please provide your comments on their matrix?
No, there's nothing else we would have done, to be honest, unless we had been involved in the RDD process further down the line. So this was the ER review saying this is what we are picking up from ZBP's proposals. There's actions they need to do once they get to the position where they're actually taking those duties and the engineering solutions that they're describing and putting that into their engineering designs. This is all prior to them sitting down with their drawings and actually sketching out what their end design was going to be.
This may be consistent with what you've just said. I see from time to time the formulation is derived generally from SHTM 0301. Now, it's the generally I'm interested in. That doesn't suggest to me that you're undertaking a, as it were, line by line detailed review.
That's correct, yeah. Because that information didn't exist at that time. In order to do what you're speaking about, you'd really have to go to the designer's finished proposals.
Mm-hmm. Mind you, there must have been some information there if you're able to say generally derived.
It was only on the columns within the matrix that they produced.
Right. So it might be a comment on the matrix itself,
Well, that's all
as
that
opposed to the content of the matrix.
As opposed to the designs which would flow from the matrix.
Right.
Let me ask you a follow-up question for the moment, if I can. The inquiry had been hearing about a process or two processes at the design stage. One called user group meetings, where people came together and looked at which room should be beside which other room or where the room should be located, and what kit was needed in rooms of particular types and what furniture was needed and what type of furniture and so on, with a view to them being, the phrase is, signed off as having been discussed and agreed. We've also been hearing about what was described as a parallel process to discuss ventilation design, because ventilation wasn't discussed in the user group meetings, because there was no one in those groups who was up on hospital ventilation. what seems to be assumed is that ZBP would produce proposals for the ventilation design of a particular area, a particular ward or whatever. And they were expecting, now these are my words rather than necessarily the precise words the witnesses have used, but they were expecting that someone wearing a GGC hat would carry out a detailed analysis of whether they had picked up the employer's requirements correctly for the ward, whether they'd understood what was intended, and so on and so forth, and come back to them and either say, you've got it spot on, or alternatively, no, you haven't got it at all, or any variation in between. Now, did you or Wallace Whittle participate in any such process?
What I think you've just described is the RDD process. And that RDD process is not dissimilar to any other hospital, and it's used in a lot of other projects. That parallel process, if you like, would have been ZBP presenting their detailed design ventilation drawings. Wallace Whittle were involved in that. From my understanding from various statements, is that the GGC employed a chap called Alistair Smith, and that's on Frances Rath's statement, and she has recorded that Alistair was employed as an M&E expert or whatever, or as part of that RDD process, looking at who would be looking at the ZBP drawings. Alistair, I know Alistair because he used to work for Wallace Whittle a long time ago. He's an electrical engineer. So I don't know what his remit was for looking at these, if you like, this second tier that you're speaking about, which is not unusual. That's a normal process to go through the RDD. But I don't know who physically cast their eye over the ZBP drawings.
Yeah, the only information the inquiry had is that this individual was focused on electrical matters.
That's what I'd expect from Alistair. But it's a long, long time ago, as most of my contacts are.
But the alternative view that's been advanced by Mr. Hall of Curry and Brown and by Mr. Seaborn in his statement is that design was a matter for ZBP. The board had a responsibility to check what was described as clinical functionality. The design was a responsibility of the design and build specialist subcontractor. Do you know anything about that? Were you involved in that process?
I wasn't involved in the process. I'm familiar with the concept, and I think ZBP themselves would accept that they were responsible for the ventilation design, as is any designer, to be frank. What they wouldn't be responsible for was reviewing or any comment, taking on board any comments they would do. Sorry, they would take on board any comments for any special requirements that the end user had. But if you're kind of splitting hairs, yes, ZBP, just like any other designer, is responsible for the design.
In any event, you and Wallace Whittle were not involved in the detailed design process. Is that your position?
Not in the RDD. The RDD, I've checked the dates, all seem to happen around about 2012, the final sign off.
Apart from this remit, where Wallace Whittle instructed to do anything else focused on the ventilation system at the new hospital after January 2010?
Not that I'm aware of.
Ms. McKechnie, at risk of maybe repeating questions that you've already been asked, if we look at the Wallace-Whittle document, the environmental matrix, that's on well, it's in two places, but Bundle 43, Volume 3, 1218, which is what is up on the screen at the moment. Could you just give me again what the purpose, I mean, what was GGC asking you to do, and what advice were you giving to GGC through this document?
Okay. At the point in time when this document was prepared, we would be looking at the details of the M&E proposals that Multiplex were putting to the board. Our role was to look at those proposals and comment on how, if there was any shortcomings with them, and I don't mean if there was, it's probably better to say if there was any lack of information or further expansion that would have had to happen to those proposals. So it was a picture at a point in time of where we thought the designs sat at with Multiplex and ZBP.
Right. So it's a comment on the stage of development represented in the environmental matrix in respect of 780 rooms, which you understood to be representative of all the rooms in the hospital.
I think Lord may have the wrong.
Sorry?
I wonder, Lord, whether the wrong document reference, because we've looked at two documents. What we want is the document commenting on the environmental matrix, which we had a moment ago.
Well, that's my fault. I think it's my fault in giving you that citation to B43. This is the document which Ms. McKechnie drew our attention to.
Yes.
And you're quite right, Mr. Connell. I should have cited that as Bundle 16 and page 1678. Thank you for that. However, now that I've got the correct citation, have I described what you were being asked to do by GGC and what you did do for GGC accurately?
Yes, and in fact, the two documents, if you like, go side by side. So the environmental matrix document is a more expanded commentary on where we felt the design was sitting, and that was condensed on the Appendix K comments, all of which was recorded as going to go to further development further down the line. So there was an acceptance that we described the state of the design at that particular time.
I may be calling for speculation on your part. Why do you think GGC wanted that information in November 2010?
I will speculate. So there would be two levels there. One was that they would be wanting to know that the designs were being progressed in a normal, which is a normal manner. Another one would be to give them, should have been to give them a heads up as to what still had to be produced and reviewed further down the line.
Right. If I've got my timing right, the full business case had been presented to Scottish Government by November 2010. My memory is 26 October 2010.
I think the Lord may be right. I don't have the date immediately to
Well-
hand, but we can easily check it.
Right. Thank you, Mr. McKechnie. My apologies, Mr. Connell.
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to your witness statement in the
All
hope
right.
that we can find where we got to in the narrative. And the reason I asked you about that was that in paragraph 7 of your witness statement, that's page 35, you had narrated the matter we discussed, that your initial appointment came to an end
Yeah.
at the end of the year. And you then go on to tell us what you were involved in up to that date. And what we hadn't identified at that point was that you had a subsequent remit to comment on the environmental matrix at a later stage. Now, you then go on to explain some of the things that you did, and then you go on to touch on some of the complications that arose because the name Wallace Whittle appeared later on the other side of the fence, as it were, for
Yeah.
reasons that we needn't worry too much about. And you point out at the bottom of page 36 that you weren't part of the team that was at ZBP who designed the ventilation. You just told me you weren't part of any team on behalf of GGC who commented on the design of the ventilation in the ways that we've just discussed. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the only footnote that you add, top of page 37, paragraph 12, is that TU Sud, which is the name then being used, and did that include you at that
Yeah.
point?
Yes.
Did some work on the redesign of Wards 2A and 4B in early 2016. Now, leave aside 4B for the moment. Let's just think about 2A. You say there you understood that that time that the redesign was due to a change in the client brief. Now, I suspect that might come as a surprise to GGC, who will say that the brief never changed from day one. It was always the Schehalian ward for the pediatric hemato-oncology department. What made you think there was a change of brief in respect of Ward 2A?
The 2A works that we were involved in, again, to the best of my knowledge, weren't to do with the. They were a minor alteration to a waiting and trolley waiting area. So the reason why 4B was a bit more involved, but in both instances, I got separate instructions and separate fees. The people don't give me instructions or fees to change something that's incorrect. They give me that because something's going to be changed and they've accepted that it's different from what they briefed or whatever.
So your 2A involvement was in a very specific.
It was a small
item.
Small thing, yes, but I included it because I thought that just for completeness.
And 4B, your different involvement?
4B was assisting multiplex in, so that they wanted to pressurise some of the bedrooms in 4B.
Mm-hmm.
So to do that, they had to upgrade. There was an upgrade of filters, there was an upgrade of air handling units, and there was physical alterations like putting in a solid ceiling within the building. So we were involved in that, and I got the instruction and I got a fee for doing that for them. So, as I say, there's certainly neither of them came across to me as being addressing a defect.
But you don't know one way or the other whether it was a defect or it was.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't a defect. Otherwise, I think it was PMI 147 was issued. So that's a project manager's instruction. I think covered the the word for B works.
Now, in the next section of your report, you comment on working with Curry and Brown. Then
Yeah.
you go on page 38 to touch on the employer's requirements, and you say you prepared the M&E information section to be found in part of the employer's requirements. You passed it on. And you were also involved in confirming what the relevant NHS guidance was for the M&E aspects.
Yeah.
Now, you say you weren't responsible for the clinical output specifications.
No.
Were you asked to relate them to any of the other materials, or it's just that was something that somebody else did?
There were a number of let's call them sub-consultants appointed by Curry and Brown, all of whom were preparing their own part of the ER requirements. The clinical output specs was one of those separate issues. So we were looking after the M&E, and somebody else was looking after the clinical output specs.
How did you know what to put in the M&E section if you weren't involved in looking at the clinical output specification?
The M&E section was capturing the M&E section was capturing the general concepts and the guidance documents which were to be adhered to for the design of the hospital.
One of the topics that's cropped up is going to crop up again in a minute when we get to the ventilation, what we call derogation, what you call clarification.
Yeah.
Is the what's been described as a maximum temperature variant. Whether that's an accurate label, let's
No,
not
that's
get into
that's
debate
good. Yeah.
about. Now, in your witness statement, you say you don't know, you don't recall anything about this at all.
Hey, absolutely not. The maximum temperature variant is part of guidance within the SHTM.
Yeah.
Now, so basically, it says you don't let the rooms go above a temperature threshold for more than so many hours.
Yeah. Well, we understand that point, right? But
well,
what I was trying to refer you to is the middle of paragraph 18 of your statement. I say I don't recall anything regarding the removal of the maximum temperature variant.
I don't recall anything from Wallace Whittle. It's not a thing that Wallace Whittle would have instigated. Now, I'm again reading the witness statements. I'm pretty sure that there is, I don't recall exactly whose it is, but within the witness statements, there's confirmation from the estates team generally that they had asked for the temperature limit to be taken away because, and I think I've got the hospital right, it had cost them, it was a budgetary concern over the cost of complying with it, which I think they had recognised from involvement in Stop Hill Hospital.
I'm asking you the question, Mr. McKechnie, because it's suggested that if anybody had been involved in discussing the removal of the variant and looking at possible knock-on effects, implications, whether it could be risk assessed and so on, it would have been Wallace Whittle. But you don't recollect that.
Not necessarily. Because I mean, bear in mind that you're dealing with an informed client. So I have no recollection of us being asked to do any work along the lines of what you're speaking about. But I now know from my reading of the various statements where it came from, the relaxation of that upper limit. As a design engineer, we referred to the SHTM requirements. The SHTM had it detailed there. Somebody has taken the decision to lift those figures. Now, that could have been the states, it could have been the sustainability consultant or a mixture of all of those. But it didn't emanate from Wallace Whittle.
I'm not suggesting it emanated from Wallace Whittle, Mr. McKechnie. What I'm suggesting is that as we go on to see, a decision on a point like that could have possible ramifications for other issues, such as ventilation, for instance, such as building design, because you're deciding to change your maximum temperature that you're prepared to tolerate. And we were trying to find out whether anyone advised the board on the possible ramifications or any risks that they might run by doing that, or any knock-on effects.
No,
Not you, anyway.
No.
You then go on to comment on chill beams and refer us to the references in guidance at the time. Were you provided at all with any of the feedback comments from bidders other than Multiplex on chill beams?
I don't recall any other commentary on chill beams. I do recall it as being part of the ZBP strategy.
But I can show you it if you need it. The point is that one of the unsuccessful contractors put on a comment, the essence of which was to say, if you go the chill beams route, you can't meet your air changes per hour figures that the guidance requires you to.
Quite possibly. We had already raised, Wallace Whittle had already raised that anyway.
Sorry, could you give me that again, Mr.
I'm saying quite possibly somebody else commented on it, but Wallace Whittle had commented on that in any event anyway.
Okay. The inquiry has been calling the ventilation derogation, and I don't want to bandy definitions with you, and I don't want to discuss with you as a ventilation engineer whether this is the right place to record a derogation which affects many rooms. But I'm keen to understand your role in this process that led to the M&A clarification log.
Okay.
Can I put this general point to you first of all? So far as GGC was concerned, you are really the key player in this process. Is that fair?
GGC had their own M&E people. So I wouldn't claim to have been the sole M&E person in the room, if you like. We were the guys who were pulling together the ER document to help them with their tender process. And we were also assisting them, as we've just spoken about, on reviewing what they got. But they had certainly had other opinions in-house.
Can you remember any names?
Well, the HFS people, it's HFS, so you had Ian Storer involved in the sidelines. I don't remember any discussion with him about ventilation, but you also had the estates people themselves who have an M&E background of leak input. And you had Alan Seaborn was referring to other people. I mean, it's noted on there that he took advice from Peter Hoffman. So I'm not trying to talk down our role, but we were speaking to, if you like, an educated client.
Ian Storer was then, as you say, with HFS.
I believe so, yeah.
And Peter Hoffman was down in England. Are there any GGC estates people who you have in mind when you think of
Ian Powery was certainly kicking it.
Sorry?
Ian Powery was certainly kicking about at that particular time.
No.
But you really need to speak to, I would say Alan Seaborn would be able to point to the other people he discussed matters with.
Thank you.
what I'm trying to get to, if I can, with your assistance, Mr. McKechnie, is this. When we're dealing with the ventilation derogation, there appears to be a series of exchanges in a relatively tight period of time, involving a relatively limited number of people, the Curry and Brown people, yourself, project team. In terms of that grouping, who were trying to get to just call it an answer, an end point.
Yeah.
You were really the key player, weren't you?
We gave our opinion, or sorry, we highlighted to the client body that, in our opinion, the proposal for, I think at that time it was 32 litres per second, didn't match the SHTM 6-year changes. But we also expressed our opinion and explained that from our position, it appeared to be a reasonable proposition, given that it aligned with the current guidance at that time, as opposed to the SHTM 0301, which was in draft format, but which also allowed a ventilation system based on an occupancy level. So we flagged it up to them that it wasn't, we didn't say this is definitively correct. We said to them, it doesn't meet that 6-year change in that draft that you've got. However, it does meet this, this and this. So that they can make an informed opinion, an informed decision, sorry.
The meeting, this, and this are references to non-hospital specific standards.
No. The current document at the time of Queen Elizabeth was SHTM 2025.
Yes, but
2025 does not have 6-year changes listed.
No, it doesn't have any. It doesn't specify
It has
any.
an occupancy level, so it has a guidance on the amount of air to be provided in relationship to the number of occupants within the room.
Yes, but this is a hospital for the next 30 years, and everyone involved, you especially, was aware that there was a draft of SHTM 0301. From the ignorant layman's point of view, I have some difficulty when you have guidance laid down by government, admittedly not technically in force, but about to become in force, and you're building a hospital for the next 30 years. Why you don't just follow the guidance? In a way, that's an unfair question for you, but it's...
No, it's fine, I'm used to them, right? So I think you're cherry picking parts of the SHTM as opposed to looking at it in the whole. The document is a guidance document. It has, if we're focusing in on the line on the single beds, it has the option to go for natural ventilation. It highlights elsewhere in the document the option of occupancy driven. It highlights within the document that the preference is for natural ventilation, and it also records that there is an acceptance that the non-consistent performance of natural ventilation is acceptable for general wards. So when you take all of those things together, it's not, I don't really think you can define it as a definitive guide. There's options there, and what we did was we highlighted to the board that that wasn't meeting the 6-year change option, but it was meeting the occupancy guidance.
Just from my education, if I go back to SHTM 0301 in the version,
The draft version.
which was the draft version.
Yeah.
I will find references to calculations of air changes by reference to occupancy level.
Yes, you will.
I will look.
And you'll also find, I'll drop you a note on it if you like, because I've got all these things. You will also find guidance in there on a preference to natural ventilation.
Yep, right. That I recollect. It was the occupancy point. I didn't recollect.
Yeah,
Therefore, I'll go back to the document.
Right.
Thank you.
I think I'm right in saying, no doubt someone will correct me later, that every other witness we've heard from describes what was done here as a derogation from the guidance, but you don't accept that. You say it's not really a derogation for the reasons you've just explained.
Again, I've been singled out as being away from the pack. You
may be right. I don't know.
Well, all I've said is that a derogation, in my opinion, is where you are talking about something which is a complete alternative. I can't think of an example of it, but where it's something which is an alternative way of doing things. What we are talking about here is a measurement of the performance. I suspect that's why it was called a clarification log.
Let me ask you this question. The initial response from the board to this proposed derogation was no, rejected, not acceptable. We know that at some point that became okay, agreed. Can you help us understand at what point a kind of no became a yes?
I think you would really need to go to the board on that, because I suspect that would be an internal discussion that they had.
Well, what I'm going to suggest to you is at the time of this was coming to a head, late December, just when the pen is about to be poised to sign the contract, the last few days, the only person, at least apparently on the plot, with expertise in this field was you. So I just wondered whether you knew.
No, and quite honestly, all I can remember was that we flagged up this proposal in the terms that it was put, but specifically highlighted that it wasn't the 6-year changes.
One of the slightly quirky points here is that a comment is attributed to John Bushfield, which he says wasn't him, but in any event appears on the log beside his name, in which he says, in response to the proposal, not acceptable, this would require board IPC sign-off. Do you remember that?
No. It's true, though, so I'm surprised it didn't stick by it, because it should have. All we could ever do is raise an engineering opinion and explain an engineering concept.
Yeah. So you would agree with the proposition, but what happened about it, you don't know?
I don't know, no. If there was IPC or any other parties involved in it, wouldn't normally have involved ourselves, but it'd be the right way to go,
Can
in my
we,
opinion.
can we have a look at bundle 17 at document number 70, which will be 2860, something like that. 2860. Oh, sorry. Now that's the ZBP paper. Can we just scroll on to the next page, please? And what we're going to get here are a series of emails right up at the wire here, just before well, we know the contract was signed on the 18th, so we're pretty far along.
Yeah.
Let's just work through these in the order they come to us, which may not necessarily be the chronological order. So this is Mark Baird of Curry and Brown to you, I assume. Copy to David Hall.
That's...
Stewart, things for today.
Yes. Aye. Sorry, I was looking at the top of it. Yep.
Yeah, and then review of Brookfield M&E statement log today. Air changes. WW, so that's you, to take board through this plus specific query, do we think it's driven by temperature, or HAI for stated number of air changes? And then there's a comment about water storage that we can leave. Now, first of all, when it says there to take the board through it, I mean, this is a habit that you get in these correspondence. It might be fine to the people at the time, but when we're looking at it years ago, what else do they mean by take the board through it? Who did you understand you were to take through this issue?
Reading that email, I'm assuming that there would have been representatives from the board or the FM, the estates guys or whatever, were intended to be there. My big problem with this is I don't remember the meeting, and I've asked repeatedly for minutes of the meeting. Don't seem to exist. I don't have the best memory in the world. All I could say is that if I was asked to take somebody through the ZBP proposal, I would have explained exactly what I hope I've been able to explain to yourselves, which was that it wasn't fully compliant with the 6 air changes in the draft SHTM, but that it did align with the other guidance at that time.
Can we just scroll down, see if there's any more on this document? Carry on. There is another one. So this is the day before. It was one of the project manager people. This is on ventilation. We see this as a sensible, practical solution and energy efficient, though it doesn't strictly comply with the SHTM.
Yeah.
Only further proviso that the room should be kept at a neutral or slightly negative pressure, as per the HTM, which needs to be incorporated. Now, two questions about that. We've had other evidence that says conditioning something on a room being slightly negative is a very difficult thing to achieve, difficult to measure and difficult to control. So is that a sensible suggestion, putting in a requirement for slightly negative pressure?
It's a sensible suggestion prior to going to defined pressures. I would disagree that that it's difficult to make an area slightly negative, because in essence you have supply air going in, you've got extra air going out, you've got a corridor sitting at the side of it. So if you extract more air than you supply, that room will be slightly negative. And that, when you go through the details of the SHTM, there are specific areas where you have a defined pressure, like in best example is probably operating theatres, etc. But it's not dissimilar to have a small change, I'm sure it says in the table that it's slightly negative. And the word slightly is used as opposed to defined so many Pascals or whatever the pressure, which would be an engineering term.
So what you say you're doing in that email is simply tendering engineering advice. I think you say in your witness statement, this is a purely factual statement. In my opinion, this option was energy efficient.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd never professed to give clinical advice.
And that's a response to an email. We'll see if we continue to scroll down from Mr. Baird, asking, can you review and advise reventilation touch option choice and so on pipes? So he's asked you to advise. So he's really saying, what do you think we should do?
Is he saying that, or is he saying, can I lay out what my interpretation of what the proposal is, so that the client, who we've already discussed as an informed client, can make an informed decision, and make an informed decision involving any other parties that they need to do for a hospital?
Can we look at another document? Can we look at the ZBP paper, which I'll find the reference to, which is bundle 16 at page 1657. Now, this, we're about to see a document by now will be painfully familiar to you because you'll have looked at it. It's dated the 15th of December, so fairly late on in the process. And it sets out various things, comments on natural ventilation, and then it basically says that what's driving this proposal is the change from 28 degrees to 26 degrees. That's really what's pushing them in that direction. You see under mechanical ventilation, and then the next paragraph.
Right, yeah.
Now, seems to be suggested that you had been shown this and approved of it. Stewart at WW apparently supports it, is the comment. Do you remember that?
Well, I don't remember a comment that may have been made verbally 15 years ago, but I do generally, and I've stated this a number of times in all the correspondence, do generally see the logic of the ZBP proposal from an engineering point.
Can we look at the second page? I mean, we have a conclusion there. The reference to building regulations and CIBSE, these are sort of bare minimum requirements, are they not?
No, I wouldn't use the word bare. They're minimum requirements, yes.
Okay.
But I think also that the point they may want to consider is that paper is proposing, what is it, 30 litres per second? The actual agreed derogation or compliance schedule, whatever you want to call it, was agreed at 40 litres per second. Now, I would suggest that someone, not ZBP, but someone has influenced that increase.
Was that you?
No.
One of the challenges we've faced here is that people quote things in so many litres per second, and other people quote things in so many air changes an hour.
Yep.
And unless you're reasonably adept at maths and you understand what you're doing, you can't actually readily translate.
You can. I accept that. The litres per second is, in my opinion, the key figure, because the litre per second is tied to the occupancy levels. The air changes is a resultant figure that comes away from that.
When you say it's tied to the occupancy level, am I right in thinking that it's calculated by reference to the number of people you assume is in the room?
Assume's going to be in the room, yeah.
And that if you end up with 40, that suggests, and the rate per person is 8, which again I've got from somewhere.
Aye.
That assumes 5 people in the room.
That assumes 5 people in the room. I kind of think if I had been reviewing this from a clinical perspective, I would also have appreciated that for the majority of the time that single occupant in a single room was getting 5 times more than the minimum fresh air that he would normally put in. You need to look at them in the whole.
Yes, because that means 40 litres of air is being introduced every second.
Yes.
And an individual might be alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you go on to make the point that while others have just said straightforwardly, this is a derogation, it's a 6 air change an hour piece of advice, and we're not complying with that, you take a more nuanced view for the reasons that you set out in your witness statement and also earlier today.
I think we're splitting hairs over about it's a derogation. It's an item in a clarification log.
Well, if you were an outside viewer of this process,
yeah,
and what you were being told was that the board was about to build hundreds and hundreds of bedrooms, where their own guidance was suggesting 6 air changes an hour, and they were going to build them providing 2.5 changes an hour, some people might regard that as a matter of considerable significance that needed brought out and highlighted, would they not?
Possibly, but and I don't mean to be disrespectful here, but again, you're cherry picking a particular aspect. If somebody likewise said that they were building a hospital which was in excess of the minimum requirements for ventilation, bearing in mind that the issue you have, and I'm not teaching my granny to suck eggs or anything like that, the issue you have is that you're trying to build a case on a document which was never ever intended to be definitive. You have natural ventilation allowed in it, you've got air changes in it, you've got occupancy levels in it. It states right through it that it's a guidance document. So yes, you can cherry pick parts out of that as you like, but it would be an awful lot easier for everybody if it was definitively said you need that, and I personally don't believe it does.
And you go on to make the point that you don't have any recollection of the meeting where you to take the board through things, and you've asked for minutes, as have we, and no one has produced any. Which
is pretty unusual, to be frank.
Well, we thought that as well, Mr. McKechnie, but we haven't got them.
And I'm sorry, I don't have them either, but I don't see that I would have come up with any other explanation than the explanation I've given to you today.
And you say in your witness statement essentially that you were simply participating in this exchange to give engineering advice.
Yes.
And you weren't involved in what assessments were done, risk assessments, discussions with IPC, any of the other things. You were just feeding in some engineering advice.
That was what our role was, and to be frank, if I'd been asked to sit in and explain to an infection control people or whatever. I would have done that. I've done that in other hospitals for different reasons, but I don't recall it ever happening in Glasgow.
Can we look at bundle 17, document 72?
Sorry, could I just get that last answer again, Ms. McKechnie? It was my fault. I lost attention.
Sorry, I was saying I don't recall being invited to discuss the air change rates with infection control people, but I have, and I am aware that I have done that on other hospitals that I have been involved in.
Thank you.
Can we go back to 2861? Yeah, so that's where we get the reference to the things that we've looked at.
The meeting, yeah.
Earlier. Can we just then scroll it forward and we'll just see all of the different exercises, because there seem to be a number of meetings and or discussions around about this time. For instance, if we just go back to 2863, we find at the foot of the page, 15th December, Mr. Baird saying, if you can review and advise the ventilation option choice, pros and cons. Did you ever produce anything which had pros and cons on it?
Yeah, I don't think so, no. No.
If we scroll on then.
I mean, if I had, we would have passed it to Curry and Brown. Bearing in mind that my employer, as it were, was Curry and Brown. So any information that we produced, the route went to Curry and Brown.
Yeah. Do you know why this ZBP paper appeared, on one view, pretty late in the process? If you're going to get a report from an expert, you might want it at a time when you can carry out some proper analysis of it.
Pure guesswork, but they may have made earlier statements, and it's been one of the boxes to be ticked prior to the appointment, and they've produced it again in an enhanced way, possibly, from what they had before. There'd been an awful lot of correspondence would be floating about round about that time.
We just carry on to 2865, see if that helps us at all. Yeah, that's the way we get the reference to, this is Mark Baird saying that's presumably ZBP, have discussed this with Stewart at WW, who seemed to support it. And you say you don't remember that, but you probably would have done.
Yes.
The reasons you've explained. If we go on to the next page, it's a blank 2867. That's the document 2869. Now here we have Mark Baird saying to you, Stewart, I think we have a way forward in this one. Need a calculation carried out, however, to prove our resolution. This involves litres per second air changes and requires your technical input. Do you remember that meeting, the half hour in the morning one?
No, that's the same week as that one that was purported to be in the 19th. So, I mean, I've read that one, and to be honest with you, when I looked at it, I was struggling even now to see what Mark was getting at in terms of he needed a calculation. I don't know what that calculation would have been, but I'm kind of suggest that that meeting is possibly morphed into this infamous 19th of December meeting.
You make a particular point about this in your witness statement at page 41, if we go back there. Paragraph 27, you say the email, that's the one we've just looked at, refers to a proposed resolution. I don't recall this. Curry and Brown are asking for our technical input. We were not in a position to provide resolutions. Any resolution of that was a matter for Curry and Brown. They didn't have any expertise in this area, did they?
No.
So the only person that was going to come up with a resolution or confirm the resolution would presumably be Wallace Whittle.
I don't think the word resolution would really fit into the context of what we were doing. As I said earlier, as a technical advisor to an informed client, I can only point to things to them. We don't ever, and we never did have the power to say, yep, that's fine, go along with that. We have the power to say, this is what's being proposed, and here's our opinion on it, and here's what it means to try and help people to get to that final discussion. And again, something else has happened to turn that into 40 litres per second.
Lord, I don't have any further questions for this witness, but this might be an appropriate time to take a short pause.
Ms. McKechnie will have to check with the room to see if
Of
there's
course.
any additional questions. So if
Yep.
I could ask you to return to the
Will do.
witness room. Thank you.
small number of questions, Lord.
Settings ready, it's just gone.
Perhaps just a few more questions, Ms. McKechnie.
Sure.
Please, Lord. I may have asked you some parts of this earlier, but firstly, at some point in your evidence, you said that you'd explained to the board that the earlier guidance and one reading of the current guidance suggested you could use an occupancy method of calculation, and what was proposed met that. Do you know who you told that to?
No, sorry, what I said was, if I had been asked, that's what I would have. And if that's not what I said, that's what I meant to say. And I think it was in respect to when we were speaking about this 19th of December meeting.
The one point in your evidence, you said something along the following lines, that you saw the logic of the proposal from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
Why did you say that? From an engineering perspective, just make sure we understand your point.
Because from an engineering perspective, the proposal aligned with various parts of the guidance which was existent at that particular time.
And can we just get the M&E clarification log itself? I think there may be a version in bundle 16 at 1662. Must be further on. One. No, here we are. This is ventilation. Sorry, go back.
Down the bottom there.
Yeah. So here we have the comment, ward air change to be 6, currently shown as 2.5, which is not in compliance. So that's the initial board position, isn't it?
Sorry, I don't know what the header is for that.
All right, well, we can scroll back to the start of the document. Board comment.
Yeah.
So it's board comment followed by Brookfield comment.
Ward air change to be 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's a Brookfield comment.
Yeah. Brookfield proposals outlined to incorporate chill beams as a low energy solution.
Yeah.
Control. So at least on the face of the log, that's the reasoning that's been put forward. I mean, this is the, if you like, the recorded result.
Yes, yeah.
That what was being proposed as a low energy solution. Is that how you remember the discussion?
the discussion I remember is as outlined by the ZBP report document that we looked at earlier, where they're explaining the benefits of going down the chill beam with the reduced air. I nearly said air change. I don't want to say that, but with the air rate.
Yeah. Good. You'll probably understand that one of the challenges we have is that apart from what's in the log and the bits of emails that we've got going back and forwards, there is no record of this having been, discussed at a committee, reported, recorded anywhere else than
I can
in
see
this
the
log.
dilemma there. Yep, and unfortunately, I can only help the inquiry with the engineering side of it. But as a layman in health terms, I would have expected that there would have been involvement by health professionals with any of this type of clarification, derogation, whatever you want to call it.
Just so we can finish this, just for completeness, you move across the page and then you then get another agreed. So I go back, because we want to read everything that says the proposal accepted on the basis of 40 litres per second. So that's where the figure comes from, 8 litres for one patient, 4 others. It says joint review to be carried out between the board and Brookfield of the energy model.
Yeah.
To determine the energy pathway. So, a negative pressure to be created in the design solution. So at least on the face of the document as it ended up, it appears to be focused on energy saving.
It's, yeah, I don't know if focus is the right word, but it's explaining their how ZBP were going to meet they were, from memory, they were pretty onerous energy targets that they had to meet. And I think that note we've just read there is an indication that that was another exercise which was ongoing.
I have no further questions, Will.
Ms. McKechnie, that is the end of your evidence for today, and I'm sure you will value the fact that as far as the inquiry is concerned, I think this is the end of your contribution, but you have, as I said at the beginning, you have attended now on 3 occasions. You've prepared for that attendance on 3 occasions. And as it's clear from your evidence today, that has involved background reading. So can I say thank you for your attendance today and indeed on these previous occasions. And thank you for the work that has gone into it.
Okay,
but
thank you.
You're now free to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Now, as I understand it, Mr. Baird tomorrow morning, but is Mr. Baird the only witness for tomorrow?
Mr. Baird in the morning, which will be my responsibility, and then I think Mr. Redmond
Mr. Redmond will be in the afternoon.
in the afternoon, which Mr. McIntosh will deal with after we had to shuffle some of the dates.
Well, we'll see each other tomorrow at 10 o'clock and enjoy the evening.